There's a big difference between using AI and becoming an AI-capable organization. Right now, many companies are experimenting. Individuals are testing prompts, teams are attending workshops, and leaders are announcing AI initiatives. But experimentation is not transformation. In this season of the Story Driven Business podcast, we've been exploring what the AI era actually demands from leadership, not just from IT departments or marketing departments. Because AI is not just a technology shift. It's a behavioral shift, a workflow shift, a power shift, and perhaps most importantly, a culture shift. If AI stays at the level of curiosity, it creates pockets of advantage. If it becomes operationalized, it creates organizational capability. So the real question is not, are we using AI? The real question is, are we building an AI-first culture that scales consistently? And to unpack this, I'm joined by my guest, John Munsell. John is known for helping organizations operationalize AI fast and at scale. He focuses on turning individual experimentation into structured capability, building AI-first cultures, creating prompt frameworks, and training workforces to adopt AI in ways that actually move the business forward. And his dominant question is simple and powerful. How do we get organizations using AI at scale, consistently and effectively? And today, we'll explore why most AI initiatives stall when leaders misunderstand about adoption and what separates AI curiosity from AI capability. John, welcome to the Story Driven Business Podcast.
Susanna, great to be here. I appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this. So great to meet you.
Likewise, and you too. So, John, you work with organizations trying to scale AI fast. What is the most common misconception leaders have about AI adoption?
Wow. There's several actually, but I would say that probably the most common is they haven't really defined what AI adoption is. And then they haven't realized that it's not adopting technology. It's really, like you said, it's a behavioral change. It involves a great deal of change management. And I'm not talking about change management like in logging the new version of whatever Microsoft Word you've got. I'm not talking about that kind of cataloging. I'm talking about the inertia in your organization to do things the way they've always been done. AI changes all that. And there's fear involved. And there's a lack of understanding involved. When you combine those two things where there's no definition of what adoption is and there's inertia to be dealt with, you got a problem. And then if I were to tie it to one other thing, I think a lot of executives get caught up in the research, and the research says 86% of companies have adopted AI. But when you read the fine print, adoption in the research is really nothing more than having one tool that has AI in it somewhere. So they may have built an externally facing customer chatbot that has AI in it, or they may have some ancillary license to Microsoft Copilot in there. That's not adoption. That's dipping your toe in the water. That's where I think everybody needs to kind of really understand what AI is and how it can change things, but define AI adoption more in terms of what percentage of your workforce actually uses it. And I don't mean uses an application you built and they're just in the loop. You know, you've heard that phrase, human in the loop. I don't mean that. I mean, give them access to AI tools with their own fingertips at their own desktops and let them build their own tools and learn their own way. That really is more like adoption to me.
That's a really good explanation. So basically, what you're saying is that using something is not adopting it. So you could rent a car and drive from A to B, but that doesn't make you a regular driver.
It doesn't make you a race car driver, right? I mean, I can go to any kind of fast restaurant or a place where you go fill up your car really quickly. Over here, they're called Circle K's or 7-Elevens or something like that. And I can go get a Hot Pocket and I can microwave it, but that doesn't make me a chef, you know? If I decide that I want to make I'm a barbecue guy. Okay. So if I want to smoke a brisket and I'm going to get after it for 12 to 18 hours, depending upon the size of the brisket, I've got to manage the firebox. I've got to season it up. I've got to trim it before I put it in there. I've got to get the right temperature. I got to hold the right temperature for 18 solid hours, making sure that I'm monitoring the fire, moving the fire in there. Then I got to make the side dishes and all that stuff. And then I got to make sure that I slice the brisket against the grain, not with the grain, all of these little things. And then you get to really enjoy a meal. All right. That helps you learn how to cook. But just going over to Arby's and getting a roast beef sandwich doesn't make you a chef by any stretch. Most of the time we get calls from executives who say, look, I don't understand this AI thing. And they'll confide in us that they need to hurry up and understand it so they can lead. And they have people underneath them that are using AI and they know it better than them. And that kind of spooks them. They're like, I don't even know how to make the right decisions. One of our clients builds AI applications for companies. So they go out and they try to sell you on some way to adjust your workflow, automate it through AI and do some other things. Well, the guy came to me and he said, man, the sales cycle is so slow. And I was like, well, I know why your sales cycle is slow. He was blaming on a salesperson and everything else. And I'm like, no, your sales cycle is slow because your target audience is afraid of making the wrong decision because they don't have enough information to really make an informed decision. So what you need to start with is training. You need to teach them about AI so they understand it. And the only way to really teach somebody about AI is to get them to use it, get them to use these LMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, Grok. You've got to use them before you fully understand the capabilities. And then you have to understand the difference between the models and the difference between the models they give you. Like, are you using a research model? Are you using a reasoning model? Are you using one just for speed? There's a whole lot to it. But when somebody actually uses it with their own 10 fingers and sees what it can do, that's when the light bulbs start to turn on. And you need everybody in your organization to have that experience. We teach this thing we call the 10 levels of AI mastery. So when we're working with a company, we'll take a poll, or if I'm speaking before an audience, I'll show them what the 10 levels of AI mastery are. And then I'll say, look, I want everybody to stand. And then as I describe a stage, if you haven't achieved that, if you're not familiar with the things that I describe at that stage, I want you to go ahead and sit down. And it's funny, man, because by level 3, 95% of the people are sitting down and they're all like, whoa, there's 7 more levels to go,
What's level 3?
Level 3 is where you get to the point where you're reusing your prompts. You've recognized that how you write the prompt makes a lot of difference. The context you provide makes a lot of difference. And you start to realize you're using certain things over and over in your workflow. And so you're starting to store your prompts and store some artifacts. Now, the problem, if that's as far as you go, then you don't get into these other areas where you learn how to structure the prompt so somebody else can read and understand what you're doing, so that you can swap out variables or containers and have it do something else. So you're not starting from ground zero every time. Or you haven't learned how to build a knowledge base where you have a whole lot of documents that can serve inside of the tool that you're using. Once you start learning that, man, things get even more powerful. And when you get up into the agentic side of things, that's levels 7, 8, and 9. That's where we need more governance and we need more security, et cetera. But the power starts to get unlocked at levels 4, 5, and 6. That's where we want the majority of the organization operating in levels 4, 5, and 6. But if everybody's sitting at level 3, we got a problem. And the thing that we also notice, Susanna, is that it takes somewhere between 19 and 24 months for somebody to get to level 5 by themselves. So if there's no training, it'll take almost 2 years for somebody to find their way to level 5 or 6. Now, why is that? Well, it's because they have real jobs, right? They're working.
I was going to say that's actually quite scary in terms of like the importance of AI adoption, because those people would be the forerunners in the company who are doing it because they're curious and capable and they want to learn. But as you said, they have their jobs and they have their lives. They don't have the required resources to put in the time and the effort that they probably want to.
Right.
And they probably do a lot of on their own time. And if that takes 2 years, that's frightening considering how
Yeah.
fast AI
Well,
is moving
yeah, I want
forward.
you to think about this. Okay, so if somebody just hops on a computer and tries to use Microsoft Word or tries to use something even more complicated like Photoshop, there are menus there, right? And so
Mm.
they're going to look at all these menus and they're going to get frustrated, but it may take them a while to click around. The difference between a tool like that that has menus and submenus and a tool like Claude, there's really no UI there, right? You're
Mm.
just talking back and forth. And so that's a
Yeah.
complete paradigm shift in how you interact with
Yeah.
software, right? So they don't know what to ask. They don't know what to do. And so they'll watch some YouTube videos or they'll do something, they'll see some TikToks, and the prompts that they give on those are what we call word vomit prompts. They're just stuff, write me a blog post that does X, Y, or Z. Okay, that's not the way to do it, but it allows them at least to have that initial interaction. So that's level one, right? And so they go, oh wow, this does something. But that's why it takes so long, because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to move up a level. So they just go, okay, well, I asked it the question, it gave me a response. I had to fine tune it by going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but I finally got what I needed. And what's not to love? They haven't really tapped into the power, because there's no one coaching them to show them what's possible.
Yeah.
But when you get into training, ours specifically, what we have, and we've had to fine tune this over the last 3.5 years, because people are busy. It'll take somebody from level 1 all the way to level 7. Some people are like, man, I don't have the time to squeeze that in. Other people are like, well, I don't think everybody needs to go all the way, because like some executives, they're like, I just want to get to level 3. I want the people underneath me operating at level 6 and 7, and I'm going to delegate to them. That's perfect. So that's where we restructured the training so that people could go as far and as fast as they wanted to. And we've compressed it as well. But when you do that, that's when we can compress that 2-year learning curve into under 2 months. And sometimes we can do it in 2 weeks, depending upon how much
Wow.
bandwidth they have.
Yeah.
But think about that. Let's just say it took 2 months instead of 2 years. That's a 22-month advantage you have over your competitor. Now, this stuff is moving at light speed, and it's literally in the total vertical stage.
Yeah.
It's no longer this slight growth thing. It is going straight up. And that means you don't have time anymore. You don't have the luxury of time to let somebody figure it out on their own. And I think, frankly, if you do let your employees figure it out on their own, you're doing them and you a disservice, because they're not able to contribute what they could. All right. Because they have domain expertise. They know your culture. They know your operation. They've been with you theoretically for years, You give them a tool like Claude Cowork or Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT. You give them access to those tools. You teach them how to use it. And all of a sudden, all of their domain expertise is amplified, because they can go infinitely faster if they know how to use it the right way. But if they don't know how to use it the right way, they'll get frustrated, because they're like, it made stuff up, it's coming back with stuff that I have to constantly fine tune. And there's a big disconnect there. What they're trying to do is look at AI and expect it to get everything 100% right, because that's what we're being sold on, right? Artificial intelligence is better than us. So they're going to hammer it until it gets 100% right, instead of just learning how to prompt, learning how to get it to where it's 85 to 95% right. And then you, with your domain expertise, you take it across the finish line. That's really how to look at it.
Do you think that people in organizations, do you think that they understand how AI works? I'm talking about like the mathematics behind it, and where does it get its information? And do you think that they understand that it's just making assumptions and estimations based on, what you tell it or ask from it?
Well, I think that's where training comes in. First of all, I don't think they need to know how the sausage is made. They just need to know how to cook it, right? And what flavor they like. So I don't think like this is the thing I had with a university here in Louisiana, where we were training some of their professors, and they approached me, and I was like, I think you guys are missing the boat. And this was 2.5 years ago. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're teaching computer science kids how to build LLMs, but you're not teaching everyone else how to use them. And I said, that's kind of like teaching kids how to build Excel with the hopes that they'll go work for Microsoft. But 1,000 times more of those kids are going to have to use Excel. So teach them how to use it. That to me is the work skill of the future. You just need to learn how to use it. And so if you don't teach your employees how to use it, then like I said, you're doing a disservice to them and to you. Eventually, I know we'll probably discuss this, but eventually there are going to be some job losses. Now, if I get laid off, I probably have a much better chance of getting a job if I can demonstrate AI fluency, not just AI literacy. If I can demonstrate AI expertise, I'm going to be valuable somewhere. And I think that's really the key, right? At a minimum, I could be an entrepreneur. Not everybody's wired that way, but
no, that's true. So the assumption is that the AI curiosity is on an individual level because organizations are not that far yet that they would understand. The top management doesn't understand what it means, so they're scared of it, and they don't have the time to worry about it, maybe, and hopefully soon. So if we have these AI curious individuals in the organization, at what point do you think that kind of an individual AI curiosity can become an organizational risk, and what kind of a risk?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, Pandora's box is open. I mean, everybody is playing around with it. And that's the one of the parts that we get called on. They're like, okay, we have people in the organization using AI. We have to get our heads wrapped around this. You want people to experiment with it, but you don't want them bringing their own tools to work. And that's what we call shadow AI. All right. There's a massive amount of risk there. So, on the easy side of the risk, there's the risk that somebody would upload personal financial statements, corporate financial statements, HIPAA compliant records, or anything like that into an LLM where they haven't learned how to shut off that LLM's ability to use that information to train the model. All right. If they don't turn that off, or if they haven't bought a license that secures that, then you just distributed some highly confidential information into an AI tool that is going to use that to train itself, which means that everybody's got access to your stuff now. So we don't want that.
It's not something that is massively discussed.
Well, here's what I can tell you. A lot of people discuss it, but they don't know what to do about it. And so they end up saying, nobody can use AI. Nobody can use it because we don't know what to do with it. Nobody's going to use it. That's kind of the wrong way to take it, because that's like back when they came up with the automobile. If you sat there for 20 years and said, no one can use a car, no one can use a car, ride your horse. Wow, your competitors are way the heck ahead. I even write about this in the book that I published last year, when this goes all the way back to 1983 or 84 bank. I used to work for a bank, and our bank acquired another bank, and the PCs had just come out. Okay. And prior to that, it was mainframes and you had dummy terminals. And so everybody who was using a computer had a terminal on their desk, but then a lot of them started to get PCs. Well, we acquired this smaller bank and walked in, and there were none of the employees had computers on their desks. And I was like, what's going on here? Well, apparently the president said, I don't want people having computers on their desks. I just don't want them having TV screens on their desks. So he clearly didn't understand where everything was going. And so when I walked up there to help turn this branch around, or this whole bank around, I was stunned at just how old their processes were. I think that people have to realize that this is just moving so fast that sitting on the sidelines or preventing your employees from using it is going to cost you. So you really should start with educating the leadership team first, as quickly as possible, helping them understand what it is, then establishing governance, which, is rules and guidelines, et cetera. So we have this thing that we call the 3-axis AI maturity model. Sounds complicated, but what it is, we talked about the 10 levels of AI mastery. Well, as you move up, the systems that you touch become more complicated, right? So your AI architecture becomes more complicated. When you start to get into agentic workflows, that's a more complicated tool selection, right? You might have API calls and some other stuff. Okay, so as that complexity increases, your governance needs to increase as well, right? So you need to have more rules and more restrictions as people start messing around with agents. Now, you've probably heard of OpenClaw, which used to be ClaudeBot, and then Moltbook, and now it's OpenClaw, right? That is autonomous AI agent workflows. And autonomous meaning it's making its own decisions, it's downloading its own tools, it's executing, and it's trying to do the task that you told it to do. And it's cool. I mean, without a doubt, it's cool, but it's the most dangerous thing you could do to bring into your organization if you don't have proper governance in place and you don't have that thing quarantined. And if somebody got on and read about it and like, oh, this is cool, and then they go download it, and then they have it downloading stuff, and then they come back to work with their laptop and they plug that laptop into the network with that thing live on it, that's a big, big, big risk because it can wipe stuff out. Look, even the tools that you get that are secure, like Claude Cowork, if you're familiar with that, it can wipe out files. And
how would that happen?
If you give it a bad command and it's trying to execute a task and it's trying to clean up after itself, and then it ends up cleaning up an entire hard drive, or it's trying to organize your emails and it, wipes them out. I mean, I guess it was what, a couple of weeks ago, somebody at Microsoft, the thing was wiping out all her emails and she literally had to pull the plug from the machine to stop it from nuking all of her emails. This other one, I can't remember whether it was student data or what, but it wiped out 2.5 years of student data. So what it did was that it went to an old backup and overwrote it. Okay. So it was trying to restore from a backup and overrode everything.
Have not heard of that happening. And that's actually quite frightening.
No, it can happen very, very easily. So you got to remember, look, if you're building an old school automation, you work in a sandbox, right? You test it, you connect all the things, you have it do all the operations that you want it to do. So you're automating manually, essentially, the code to have it go through these workflow steps, right? You test it out, and then you look for the edge cases and you try to fix all of those, and then you put it into production. If somebody just brings in one of these AI tools and plugs it into your network, it's essentially in production, out of a sandbox, and it's trying to execute a command for you. And so it's making its own decisions. Let me just give you an example. ClaudeBot, this guy, I'll get the story completely wrong, but I'll give you the gist of it. But
give me the gist.
What he did was, in order to communicate with it, it doesn't have its own chat interface. So you teach it or you connect it to a tool like WhatsApp. And so you're sending it a text message and it's sending you a text message back. And you're saying, hey, I want you to do this. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Well, this guy ends up dictating a message into a voicemail, and the ClaudeBot didn't have the tools to recognize it, but recognized it was a WAV file, went and downloaded a software application that would allow it to turn the WAV file into text that it could then understand. It then understood what the command was, but then thought, well, if he's communicating to me with audio, I need to communicate back with audio. So then it went and it found something that would take his text, the bot's text, and convert it to audio and send it back. And then it dialed him up and it was talking in a voice. And he's like, whoa, how did you, and it's like, oh, well, I noticed you didn't have this. So I downloaded that. And then I noticed you didn't have this. So I attached that and I turned this on. Then I downloaded this and blah, blah, blah. And so it did all of this stuff without being told, without being asked, but it just assumed that's what it was. So these AI tools make decisions. They infer from your request, and they're mission oriented. So imagine if it's going through its task, it's building a workflow on its own. It's not like the old days where you would, connect it. It's making decisions on its own. So that's why it's very important that you know what you're doing when you move into those. That's going to be level 8. You move into level 8. you better have a whole lot of reps under your belt inside of the sandbox,
I'm clearly now nowhere near level 8, and now I'm frightened to even try to get there. This puts the whole AI conversation in a new perspective in terms of why people are also scared of it. But I could see that individual curiosity in an organization where this is not governed nor discussed could end up in a situation like this, with someone just being curious and, maybe wanting to even show up a little bit in a good way, and then ending up in this rabbit hole.
Well, Claude Cowork can actually work on your hard drive. You can give it shell commands. You can do all kinds of things in there. And I'll give you an example of just how incredibly powerful it is. You're giving it access to a drive. You're giving it access to folders. You're telling it what to do. So I have to file these expense reports every month, and I have a folder where I download all the receipts and invoices. And most of the time I'm putting them in a folder for the vendor. Sometimes when you hit the download button, it just throws it in the download files, right? And then you have to go and move it. Well, I had like 85 folders for different vendors and about 70 or so receipts in the downloads folder that weren't categorized. And since I've been doing this for years, each one of those folders had a whole bunch of receipts in them. And I was like, man, I need to clean all that up. So I just pointed Cowork to that folder. And I said, look, I want you to create subfolders in each of these folders, one that says 2025 and backwards, and the other one is 2026 and forward. So anything that's older than 2025, I want it in a separate folder. Everything that's 2025, I want it in a folder. And then I want you to create a folder 2026, move anything that should be there. And then I want you to go to all the uncategorized ones and find a home for them, or just move them into a new folder called miscellaneous. And if I had to do that, I mean, think about it. I had 86 folders that don't have subfolders, and they got a bunch of receipts in them. If I had to do that myself or hand it off to an assistant, that's a few hours of work, right? It did it in 23 seconds, something like that. And I mean, it created all the subfolders in each of the folders, moved all the files into the appropriate folders, and then it found some, and it said, well, there are so many of these, and these. I created 3 new folders for this vendor, and this vendor with the same subfolder structure and moved them over there. So it made that judgment call on its own. Instead of moving everything into a miscellaneous folder, it says, there's so many of them, I'm going to go ahead and create another folder. I didn't ask it to do that. That's not a decision tree that you build in the old school logic. And then it did everything. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Now imagine that inference being something that says, okay, and when I was finished, I took this and I moved it there, and that overwrote something. Okay, well, I didn't ask it to do that, and that's where things get risky. But it was an incredible thing. And then one more example that was just mind-boggling. I frequently stay at different Marriott hotels, okay? And they give you this thing called a folio when you leave, right? So first you put a deposit down on the hotel, because I'm usually staying there for several days. And then when you check out, they send you a folio. But that's the only receipt that you get is this folio. And so, I have to match my credit cards with the deposit they took, plus whatever they did. It's a mess. And so I had, I don't know, 4 of us went to go train at a university in New Orleans. And so I had all of these folios in there and all this stuff, and I'm paying for it all on my credit card. And it was a mess. Plus, there were, let's say somebody ate at a restaurant in the hotel or had coffee. Well, they pay us a per diem, so I don't want that on the bill that I send to the client. And then we have parking charges and all this other jazz. So I just put Cowork on it. And I said, look, I want you to reconcile all of the folios in here with these credit card charges. And that was pretty much all I did. And it built the most incredible spreadsheet with multiple tabs explaining what everything was. And I told it, we can't charge for meals because we're charging a per diem. And so it pulled all the meal charges out, made the right assumptions, even some of the names on the folio were weird. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And it just said, oh, this looks like it's going to be a charge for coffee in the whatever area. I'm like, wow. But that was a total of 40 seconds, something like that. But my point is, it's operating on my hard drive. I didn't have to upload all those things and have it do all that in the cloud. I was like, here's the folder, reconcile everything. Boom, it did it. It's cool.
It's but that's what I was going to say, that while there's obviously these amazing benefits to it, but the point being that when it operates on your hard drive, it could also make totally disastrous assumptions. And it's something that obviously organizations should be aware. And this is part of the adoption and understanding, what you're using it for, instead of just testing it out. So I think this is a good segue into AI first culture. I'm into referring to corporate culture, organizational cultures, as like an interpreter of organizational behavior. Mm-hmm. And then you need to know what kind of behavior your business needs so that the culture system will support it, instead of trying to break it or making it difficult for you to succeed as a business. So I'm against referring to culture as what I call the fun at work culture, where it's more just about what would be the kind of a fun culture? Let's ideate and let's create that kind of culture. And then it's all about vending machines and stuff like that have absolutely no reference to what the business is and doesn't support you understanding whether I want to use my skills and capabilities for the good of this business or not. So when we talk about AI first culture, what does that really mean to you?
So unfortunately, that phrase has been bandied about for a few years now, AI first, and it's in my first book. I don't know who coined it, and I know that the Marketing AI Institute is now trying to push the phrase AI forward. I don't know whether either one is appropriate, frankly, because it is the world we are now rapidly living in. But if we were to take it at face value, AI first to me means that every employee is thinking about, how do I use AI first before I go doing it the old way or asking somebody for help or something else. In other words, the more I think about using AI, as long as I know how to use it safely and securely, and I know how to use it effectively, then it's an amplifier like nothing you've ever seen before. And the more of our employees that I get working in that mindset, the faster we propel. But there's a point where I think there's a danger that we all face, and that is where people they've been sold that AI is smarter than every human on earth. Okay. We have to calibrate that and think about what that actually means. Can it do a whole lot of knowledge workers' jobs better than they can and faster than they can? Yes, provided the instruction sets are accurate and the context is given. If it's not, and you haven't really trained it well, it can be just a really fast disaster. But on the other end, if you have the right person at the helm running it, it is an insane amplifier. So that's where I look at it like, all right, I want my people to use it as a tool to make them better, but I don't want them abdicating their expertise to AI because they have been sold that it's smarter than them. Does that make sense? That's where I think the danger is people think AI is smarter. And so they just take what AI gives them and going, and it's because it's so voluminous and it's so fast. You think, oh, well, I don't have time to read through all that. And I'm just going to move it down the chain. And that's where I think we all kind of mess up. One of the things that we try to teach people is understanding what AI currently is doing and what tasks or roles it's taking on, and what does that do to you to free you up to do something that's more important to the organization. Right. So are you familiar with the work of a guy named Ichak Adizes?
No. No.
Wrote a book many, many moons ago, I think in the late 90s, called Corporate Life Cycles. I think the subtitle is How Companies Grow and Die and What You Can Do About It, or something of that nature. Anyway, very, very good book. The chairman of my board told me to read it about 15 years ago because he said that's how he built his company and he drove it to an IPO. In each work, he has these four things. Basically, we're all a mix of one of these four. Okay, you're a producer. That's somebody who just likes to crank out the work. You're an administrator. That's somebody who likes to put structure and organization around something. You're an entrepreneur. That's the idea person. Or you're an integrator. That's the person that likes to get culture and community and getting people to collaborate and work together. Does that make sense? So in that, what you have to think through is what is your dominant trait? For me, it's entrepreneur. I'm an idea guy, you know? For others in my organization, they're producers or they're administrators or, one person's an integrator. You have a different mix. Now, to really grow a company, you have to know what your balance is. When you're really trying to grow, you need more entrepreneurs and more producers and less administrators and less integrators, because the administrators have a tendency to organize and slow things down. Right. But then you get to a point where you have to branch up from that, and you want a good balance of all of them in a small number of integrators. In an AI council, for instance, one of the things we teach is try to have a lot of entrepreneurs or idea people on the council buffered with some of the administrators, because the administrators are going to like to put the rules, but you need to have a balance because you want people to move fast and experiment. But if you think about what AI does, AI is basically a producer and an administrator if you give it the rules. Yeah. But it's not going to be somebody who just out of thin air comes up with an idea unless you really prompt it to come up with something. But it's only going to come up with ideas based on its training and its material and its context. It's not going to fabricate something out of thin air, which is what humans do. And it's also not going to build culture. It's not going to get everybody feeling warm and happy. It's not going to do any of that. So as it replaces all of those P&A jobs of yours, that gives you more time to be an I or an E. But if you're not naturally wired to be an E, then that may be an uncomfortable move for you, right? However, you do have significant domain expertise in whatever you're an A and a P over. Now you can be 10 times more powerful in your job because AI accelerates what you're naturally good at. And so when you do that, you don't lose your corporate culture. You don't lose your soul. You just get the right people working more effectively and faster. And so anyway, that to me is what AI first is a complicated explanation. But AI first was just I don't want our employees thinking of AI as something that they need to abdicate their intelligence and their years of experience to. I want them to look at AI as, you are my tool, I am not yours, right? I'm going to give you what I want, but your employees are the only ones that know what excellence looks like. Now, if your employees don't know what excellence looks like, you're going to get average just a whole lot faster.
Yeah. I really, really, really love this insight, because when I earlier said that people don't really understand the mathematics of AI, that's what I mean, is that if you don't understand that it doesn't have that ideation power unless you give it the context, because it is just calculating information that already exists in the orbit that it has access to. And if it doesn't have any context and you haven't prompted correctly what you want from it, it doesn't really give you value. I thought that was a brilliant way to put it. Thank you, John.
Sure. Yeah. No, I just find it, if you know how to use AI, it is the most powerful tool, but there are plenty of times, and I have to coach my employees and our students the same way. It is that you need to know when to take over, okay? In other words, sometimes you're thinking, oh yeah, AI is going to get this, and you just keep hammering it and hammering it and hammering it, and you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And let's take something simple like a blog post. You write the blog post, and then you keep pushing AI to rewrite this and rewrite that, when you'd be a whole lot better learning how to prompt it to get to 85%, and then you take over and make it sound like you and make it work like you. But if you don't know how to prompt it, it'll get 60% there, and then you'll publish it and it'll sound like everybody else's work. If you learn how to prompt it right, you could get it to probably 90, 95%. But stop making it to where you expect 100% out of it. Just get it to where you can take over, and then it's still yours, and it's still your thoughts that are going in there, and you're still the one who is over AI. AI is not over you.
Right.
That's the key for me.
I work in the marketing and communications segment, but very deeply integrated with leadership and talent attraction. And obviously, in the marketing section, there is a lot of the conversation is just sort of hammering around that we just hired somebody who's going to create our blog posts and content with AI, and it's worrying to me because it shows that these people don't really understand the importance of context. It's a brilliant way to use the tool for something like a blog post, but as you said, that if you don't give it the context that is your organization's intellectual property, how you want it to sound, work towards the goals that your business needs it to work for the target audience that you want to impact with that blog post, and get them do something and give it information that is your competitive advantage, then it will effectively be a generic blog post that anyone can, and probably a lot of companies are getting out of AI and also publishing. So that's kind of like a waste of time with no value. How should we value the output of AI if we use AI as an organization?
Yeah, so there's several ways to go about that. First, I would say one of the things that we created early on that really helped a lot of people was a tool that we call the AI strategy canvas. That canvas is what shows you visually. We have 9 blocks in the canvas, and most people just dive right in and AI to do something. That's what we would call the request. That's the 9th block. So there are 8 things that you need to probably prepare before you even get there. You don't need to do it every time, but when you're doing something at a production level, like writing a blog post, block 1 is the target audience. Who are we writing to? Block 2 is the company. What's our company about? Block 3 is the products and services. What are our products and services? How do we integrate those? Block 4 is context. What are some of the other catch-all things we need to put in there? And then you have role. What's the role that we're asking AI to play in this whole thing? In other words, who did we just hire? And then you have style and brand voice. How do we want it to talk? And then you have resources. Are we going to upload other documents? Are we going to search a URL, whatever? Then you have the rules. What do I don't want it to do? What do I not need it to touch? What are disclosures I have to make it always say? Then you do the request, okay? So you look at that map when you're actually trying to produce something, and you make sure you have that covered. Now, if we just took the target audience one, for instance, you could just say, we're trying to reach CEOs of healthcare companies, and it's going to infer a whole lot on that. On the other end, if you build out a really deep, rich profile of your target persona, where you're talking about their pains, their frustrations, their fears, their goals, their aspirations, their personality, all of that stuff, and you have that as a document, and you tell it, this is who I'm targeting, well, you're tightening those inferences to even better detail. So when you do that, you produce a much better output, a much better blog post. The middle one, that is what we would call context, what you want to do there is this is where you feed it parts of yourself. You feed it your own thoughts. What are my thoughts on the subject? Now, you could tell it to do some research on topic X, but that's where you're doing what everybody else is doing. Write me a blog post about topic X. Okay, well, you're not adding value, you're not doing anything else, but you certainly must have an opinion on it. Or you have to tie it into your company or tie it into the products and services and your audience. Now, when you provide that and you try to write a blog post, now all of a sudden it's adding a lot more value, and it's tying it to what you do. You don't want to drive irrelevant traffic, right? I don't want to drive a whole bunch of traffic to a restaurant when I'm a laundromat. You know what I mean? I got to make sure I'm focused. But on the other end, if I'm a consultant, I don't want to just post generic stuff. I want to say, look, here's my take on this. Here are my thoughts around this, and put that in there. And that's where it starts to be interesting. One of the more critical things that everybody overlooks is that if you prompt AI right, it will challenge you rather than act like a sycophant and constantly praise you. So I want it to push back, right? I want it to challenge my assumptions and my ideas and make me think through something. So that's part of my system instructions. I'm telling it, look, I want you to push back. I want you to look for the nuances that would escape my attention and anybody else's, bring them to my attention, and let's work through this together. So when I'm prompting AI these days, and this has changed over the years as these models progress, I'm telling it, look, you and I are partners on this thing. And here's what we're going to try to do together. Instead of me saying, you're a direct response copywriter, I'm making it say, look, we're going to work together on this. Let's make this the best thing that we can. And what it comes back with is way different. And I'll give you one more, for instance. A friend of mine shot me a text yesterday. He goes, hey, my daughter is thinking about relocating her medical practice here to Lafayette. And he gave me her specialty. And I was like, okay. He said, what tool should she use to do market research to determine whether or not it's an economically feasible move for her? Rather than say what tool, and just say, oh, yeah, go to ChatGPT. I said, well, I went to Claude, and I have this thing I have called a Claude thought partner. And in it, I have it doing that, give me the back and forth. And so I literally pasted his text into it. And I said, all right, help me. This is the key. Help me write a prompt that will analyze the market for this so that I can run it in different LLMs. And it pushed back and it says, all right, well, if you really want to do the market research on this, that specialty that you gave me of hers is pretty broad. And it listed like 7 things. Is there anything in here that's really special? Is she trying to look for cash patients or insurance patients? Is she going to be in a partnership? Is she going to be on her own? And it starts giving me all these questions. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. And then it said, what's driving the relocation to Lafayette? Would she be open to Baton Rouge or New Orleans? It had all these questions. And I was like, okay, very cool. So then I just said, look, let's make this assumption, that assumption, this assumption, that assumption. And as far as the insurance mix, I just want you to tell me whether the demographics will support both or whether she's going to be stuck in one area given, her area of expertise. And it wrote this massive prompt in Markdown. I mean big. And so then I pasted it into GenSpark. I pasted it into Perplexity. I pasted it into Gemini and ChatGPT. And each one of them, I turned on the deep research mode. And I did it just before our call. So they were still running. They've been running. And this is the cool thing about the models these days. They've been running for, 10, 15 minutes now. So it's not a 20-second, here's your research. This is a deep research. So I'm going to have some really deep documents here. I bet you some of them will be anywhere from 25 to 50 pages long of information. But I wouldn't have done that if I had just gone to a YouTube video and said, give me some market research on the such and such medical industry in Lafayette, Louisiana. This is really detailed stuff with competitors and everything.
It's so phenomenal and so inspiring. 2-3 years forward, what do you think will separate AI winners from AI pretenders?
Are we talking about individuals or companies?
Tell me. You tell me.
Shoot, I shouldn't have asked that, shouldn't
I? True.
No. So, if we take it corporately, I think the winners are going to be the ones that allowed their employees to use AI. And this is kind of a hot take, if you will, because the majority of businesses out there and all the research firms are focused on one killer app. And the CEOs that we deal with are like, oh, you give me one app that's going to save me $1 million and I'll fund the heck out of that. But what they don't realize is that if you have, I don't care whether it's 50 employees or 50,000 employees, if you're just going to spend $2 million building a customer facing chatbot to handle tech support and all that stuff. That could be great. It could also go off the rails on you, but you're going to spend a ton of money bringing people in to try to figure that out. And if nobody in your organization has the collective knowledge to help guide that initiative, it's going to fail. I mean, MIT said 95% of AI initiatives fail, and I think they missed why. They pointed it to tool selection. I think they should have asked a little bit deeper, because what makes somebody select the wrong tool? Lack of information, lack of knowledge, lack of expertise. How did they know?
Lack of resources.
I don't think they had the collective wisdom inside the entire organization to drive that initiative. So I think if on the other end you have, let's round up, let's say you had 500 employees, and let's say that 400 of those 500 are using computers for more than 30% of the day. If you train those 400 how to get to level 5 or 6 in the next 4 weeks, the impact to your P&L will be millions of dollars. On the other end, you'll spend millions of dollars trying to create one application that might save you $1 million. Okay. So I think the winners are going to be the ones that enable their workforce. They're not going to be the ones that look for a tool to replace a big chunk of their workforce. I'll give you an example of a smaller company. One of our clients, I think they have 60 employees, and the CEO went through our training, which is really cool. And he himself built a tool that would analyze these RFPs that would come in from these really large entities. And these RFPs would have 300, 400, or 500 pages. And they'd have to go cull through that to figure out, okay, what is it that we can sell into this RFP? And he said most of the time we would just ignore them, because it would take 3 hours of his time just to see whether it was something worth exploring. And then it would take another 3 weeks of analysis to determine whether or not they could make a proposal that would be competitive. And then they would either trash it or move forward. So that 3 weeks took 3 people. So think about all the time there. He has now, as an outgrowth of just going through the training, he built a tool to do that himself. He originally built it to work on GenSpark, and then he moved it to Claude when Opus 4.6 came out. He said it's amazing. He can get to a go or no-go decision in 20 minutes, and he can have a full response in 3 hours with one person running it. And he said, now here's where the interesting part comes. I said, well, what kind of an impact will this have to you? And he said, well, we would only respond to about 3 of these per year, and we get 5 to 8 per month. And he said, now we can probably respond to 3 or 4 a month. And he said, this will be millions of dollars. He said, if we get 1 out of 3, that means each one is at least $250,000. And so you do the math on that, and they just open up a whole new revenue stream for themselves. And they didn't have to suck up everybody's time to do it.
Yeah.
So to me, the only reason that's possible is because the CEO himself went through the training, and now he's like, I'm putting everybody through this, because he realizes this is a game changer for them, and he can accelerate really, really fast. And then he said his brother, who happens to be on the sales side of the organization, said, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to show it to all the attorneys. And he said, no, you're not going to show it to anybody. We're going to hold this ourselves as long as we can, because we want to propel ourselves way, way forward. So I think that's where the winners are going to be. The winners are going to be the ones that train everybody how to use it, because the ideas start flowing, and they start to learn things that you can't just have a consultant come in and say, oh, I can build this workflow for you. Oh, wow, that's great. Let's do it. You get way more ideas. You get way more participation. You get everybody in the organization knowing how to speak AI in the same language. And now all of a sudden you have massive impact. Usually, I think the winners are going to be the ones that train their way up to level, say, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
They could get all the way to maybe level 8. But if you're an individual and you're operating at a level 6 or 7, you will be able to find work. And at a minimum, you could start your own company. But that's kind of where I think. I think the losers are going to be the ones that listen to somebody saying, oh, we need to build this one big app, you know, I think those are going to be the losers because they miss out on the idea flow. And
Yeah.
I think they sacrifice culture for something like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get a lot of fear in your organization when you say, we're going to build this application and it's going to replace all these workers.
Yeah.
That's not a fun place to work.
No, that's not. Tell me about your training. It's interesting. I'm sure that everyone who listens to it, if you're not interested to hear about John's training, then you should not be listening to my podcast anymore.
Well, so we have this thing that we call the AI Skills Builder, and we're in the middle of revamping the entire thing. And it was originally track based, meaning we'd have a track for HR, a track for marketing, sales, accounting, legal, etc. We had like 10 tracks. And each one, we would bring you from level 1 all the way to level 6 and possibly even level 7. But that was all in one training. And the feedback we got over the last several years is these people are busy and it's really hard for them to find the time. So unless we could, compress it, it would be hard for everybody to get there in 6 weeks. So, we'd have to stretch it out and let them stay in there for a while. But so now what we've done is we're compressing it, and we're probably going to build our own learning management system for this, because we know that it needs to be very, very focused, and people need to be able to go to whatever level they feel is good enough for them. So we're creating an LMS that will give the executives a dashboard that shows where everybody is. And we have a heat map that will show where's the bulk of our employee base. Are we all, levels 1, 2, and 3, and how do we gradually move that to 5, 6, and 7? And then at the same time, what we do is we help companies establish governance. And so, like, for instance, right now, we're working with a large university in New Orleans to teach them how to set up an AI center of excellence, an AI governing board, and an AI council. So that is a 2-year process. The training, you can go to bazooka.com, BIZZUKA.com, and read about our different training programs. But if you're a corporation, then we would sit down with you and say, look, what do we need to do? Do we need to present you with a bespoke training, or would some of these modules work for you? That's kind of where it is. If on the other end, if you're just an individual, I would really recommend just starting with my book, which is Ingrain AI. And you can get that, I think you can get the Kindle version for $10 on Amazon. So that is not a why it's important book. It's a how-to manual. Even if you're a business owner, that book literally explains all of our frameworks, all of our processes, and it shows you how to do all of this stuff. Obviously, the training is going to go way, way deeper, but that is a perfect start for anybody. It literally will take you through setting up governance. It'll take you through writing the right prompts. It'll take you through the AI strategy canvas. It takes you through everything. So that's the inexpensive way to get started, I would say.
I'm definitely going to get started with that one.
All right,
and for the listeners, I'll put a link on the show notes page for you, so you can also get your hands on that and get started. This has been just so remarkably inspirational, John. Just like I said, I could easily listen to you for another hour or two, but I know you've got to get going as well. Thank you so incredibly much for this opportunity to have you on my podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I tell you, what I'd like to do for your listeners, and to give me some added pressure. So as I told you before we got on air, I'm sitting here at a hotel in Galveston trying to catch up. This is where I hole up for a whole week to try to get stuff done. The main reason I came here, I don't know that I'm going to get to, so I need your pressure. And that is to write the second book, which is an add-on to the first book. I really wanted to have that done by the end of April. But if your people will go to ingrain.ai/2026, and tell them that they heard about me through your podcast. When this book is out, I'll give them a free digital copy of the book so they can get on that waiting list by going to
Wow.
ingrain.ai/2026. And again, that gives
Yeah.
me the pressure to write the beast.
Pressure, John, so that we can get our hands on that book as well.
That's right. And I'm working on the audio book for the first one. So I'm hoping I'll have that audio book done in about 10.
Good. Do it, because in addition to reading, I really love listening to audiobooks, business books, when I'm taking walks with the dog or dogs
Me too.
or things like that. And then when I hear interesting stuff, when I get back in, I have to go to the book and just like do my little marks and comments and, notes in there. So 10 days, I'm giving
That's
you
it.
10 days.
Yeah,
Max.
that's right. I just finished chapter 6, so I think it's 16 chapters. I don't know. So I got a long way to go, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Good.
The trickiest
Good.
part is towards the end where I walk people through prompts. I don't know how you do a prompt in an audio book.
I know, because I published my first book last year, and I also had some like example kind of things in there. And when I was reading the audio version, I was like, how the heck do you do this on audio? I wasn't prepared. It was just like when I got to the first section, I was like, whoa, not sure how to do this. So
Right.
and they were not like prompt kind of things. So I totally understand you. But you need to ask Claude to write you a script for that.
I think I know what I'm going to do. I mean, like if you get the book, it also shows you how you can go and download the frameworks and the prompts. So I think what I'm going to do in the audiobook is just say, look, go here so you can download these prompts. Here's what the prompt does. I'll describe it a little bit. It'll probably be hokey, but we'll see.
I did that in many of those, because it was just like, it's going to be easier also for the listener when they can actually download it and see it in front of them instead of trying to remember what I'm saying here. So, yeah.
It's going to be interesting, but it's been a blast.
It's going to be epic. Yeah, it's been a blast.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Now I need to do the closing monologue and my head exploding with information in a good way. But alrighty, so as we wrap up, I want to underline something super important. This AI transformation is clearly not about who has the best tools. It's about who knows how to use them and who aligns the organizational behavior or their own behavior the fastest. And the individuals or organizations that win won't be the ones who experiment the most loudly. They'll be the ones who are building consistent capabilities across teams and workflows and leadership layers and culture. And that requires something so much deeper than prompt frameworks, even though you're going to want to get those also from John's existing book and the new book as well. So the question is, why are we doing this? What does AI mean for our future? And how will it change how we work and how we lead? When leaders cannot answer these questions clearly, adoption will slow. But when they can, transformation with all these significant and exciting and phenomenal opportunities will only accelerate. So, John, just like, thank you so much for bringing this practical clarity to a topic that has been hyped or oversimplified. And there's so much information in this episode that it's just going to burst out. To those of you who are listening, if you're leading this AI era, the question is not whether AI will change your organization, because it already has changed your organization. The real question is whether you are intentionally shaping that change, or are you just reacting to it? Thanks for listening. Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Bye.